Okay, folks, this morning we are going to go over some poster formatting do's and don'ts because your poster can go from really, really good to really, really bad with just a couple changes, and can go from really, really bad to really, really good with just a couple things that makes it very enticing to the eye. To start, let's go over the big idea for what your poster is. Your poster is a visual snapshot. Your poster is a visual representation of what you did. That means that most of the information should be coming from you, not the poster itself. So, some specific things to think about. Your poster should be readable from about 5 to 6 feet away, which means that the text is actually going to be pretty big. Yes, we have giant posters that are 36 by 48 inches, but the text itself also is very big, so it takes up a lot of space on there. You should also be able to tell a clear story in under 30 minutes or 3 minutes, which means that if I'm going to read your poster, at least one section of it, I should be able to read and summarize what it means in very, very short amount of time of reading or looking at figures or taking a look at the abstract only, stuff like that. The story of your project, while you have spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on it, we don't have that kind of time to present that. So you will have to kind of summarize it in a very short amount of time. Your poster should also be able to give the reader some indication of what happened, and you are the missing piece instead. So it should invite questions instead of having me read forever and ever and ever and ever on that poster. So there's a couple of specifics that I'd like to go through on how to make your poster formatted the best it possibly can. The first goal in mind is design it for distance, as in that 5 to 6 feet range for me to be able to read it. And that works out to like this. Your font sizes should be somewhere around 72 to 100 point for your title. Rule of thumb is probably less than 120 characters for your title. Section header should be 36 to 48 point, and that's just your introduction section header, your results section header, your method section header, stuff like that. And the body text should be 24 to 32 point, meaning it should be pretty small. That sounds really big because we're used to writing in 12-point font, but that's only twice as big or 3 times as big. So you really should be kind of conserving the body text as much as possible in your poster. I would recommend using 3 to 4 columns. The 4 column kind of looks like this, where you have one column specifically on the far left flap of our poster. The far right one has one as well. Or you could do a 3 column where you have the far left one here and the far right one here, and then just a big section in the middle. That's totally fine too. I will show you again how to make it so that you have your flaps folding on some blank space again. Notice that both of these designs, though, flow from top to bottom, as in I start at the top left corner and I read down, and then I go to the right and I read down, and I go to the right and I read down, and I go to the right and read down. Same thing with this one. You don't want to have your introduction or abstract in the top left corner and then be followed by the introduction over here on the right side, then the methods over here and the results down here. You don't want to pick and choose things based on sizing. You'd rather have it flow naturally and size things appropriately, which brings me to the next point. Do not shrink your text to be different sizes so that you can fit more and use long paragraphs. You might find this kind of interesting. You can use bullet points for your project's poster if you choose. That's why I'm recommending you write a paper so that you can use bullet points or small sentences instead of big honking paragraphs on your poster. Now, you'll recognize in previous years that the long paragraphs on the posters were for them to earn as many points as possible. I'm going to start to be a little bit more lenient on what can and cannot be done for long paragraphs. I'm a traditionalist. I tend to read more as time goes by, but uh, posters are moving in a direction where you can kind of write less and be the presenter yourself. So we'll take a look at uh, how to make your poster still have a bunch of information in it, but be able to crop as long sentences as we can. The pro tip for you here, I'll show you how to do this on slides, but you'll set your zoom on slides at 100% and then stand 6 to 8 feet away from your computer to see if you can read it. If you can comfortably read it, then that is an appropriate size for your body text. But if you cannot, you might want to make your body text bigger, which means removing more of your information. So here is my example of a poster template, and I wanted to show you how to do two things. I think I've shown you how to change the grid for yourself here, or have guidelines for it, but you can show guides so you don't have the flaps interfering with anything that you are writing. Once you have the guides, you can edit them to be the appropriate size. Again, the first thing to do would be 12 inches and 36 inches. You can have horizontal guides be at the bottom of your title so that you can move things directly to it. The nice thing about the guides is it allows you to move your sections to butt up right next to them. So if I can go and highlight these two things and group them together, I can move the abstract away from it and it'll snap to it later on. So that is something to pay attention to. That if I move things accidentally out of the way, you'll notice that it locked right onto that line right there. I mentioned zooming into 100% and seeing if you can read it. That zoom is very easy to find. It's just going to be 100% right there. And if I stand 6 feet away from this poster, like so, can I read my body text? And in this case, I can. Not great, so I might want to go with a bigger size in the end. That's about the smallest it's going to be, but that's okay. I do remember telling you to use smaller text for the captions. Feel free to do so that you can fit the captions a little bit better on your figures. Um, and that's okay because you can allow someone to lean in closer to read the caption because the figure itself should be as self-explanatory as possible. So the captions aren't going to be that big of a deal if they're a little bit small. For the next goal of your project, I do want to show you this one as a prime example of something not to do. As you can see, not only do they have a very colorful set of colors for their different sections here, but they have a very busy background. They have tons of logos and different things on there. I'm assuming that this is about space, but really it's about feeding on weight in space. Um, it just doesn't help us a whole lot to understand this project, and it's definitely one that you do not want yours to look like in the end. So the next goal is to keep it as clean as possible. You do kind of want to have white space on your poster, or at least negative space if you decide to have a poster with a colorful background of some kind, meaning that the space between things is meant to be there to help you kind of have the reader pause for a second. Much like if I added a comma to a sentence, the space between sections is allow me to pause to think about stuff as I read. You probably don't want to have too many different fonts. I would stick to 1 to 2 fonts per poster maximum. I definitely wouldn't do any script fonts because those are subject for people to misinterpret letters and stuff. I would use a simple color palette, something that's more monotonic or at least complementary colors to it. You don't really want to have too much going on. Something like Marissa's here was a pretty good one to have an example for because her information is clearer and the colors don't distract from the actual information. Whereas Ryan's does mostly the same thing. Probably too pink and selective for my eyes, but maybe, I mean, her project won the Feminist Award, which was for women, so it does speak to that in high volumes there. So um, be sure to play around with your color palette a little bit to make it make sense for your poster. The overall goal, though, is don't make your poster rainbow color like the space one I showed you just now, because that's way too distracting. I can't focus on one thing at a time if I have different colors fighting for attention. You also want to make sure that you align your boxes and figures cleanly as possible. The nice thing is you can add guides that say, this box is to be lined up 1 inch from the left side and 35 inches from the left side. So you have a 1 inch margin on all sides, or you can do a ½ inch margin on all sides. You can even use the grid that I showed you here. If I were to have it back in fit mode, I can use grid view. No, that's not what I want. What do I actually want? I guess it is just guides that you can snap to. So if I wanted to add another guide that was vertical, that was off the edge about a ½ inch, and another guide that was a ½ inch from the edge, so that'd be 35.5 inches. Not 35.5, it's 48 inches long, so it'd be 47.5. Excuse me there. Now I have a line that is directly on the edge of where I don't want to be, and I can zoom in and move my section directly to it, just like that. So use those guides as much as you need to be able to get your spacing appropriately. And I can even resize this to the very edge of that fold if I wanted to, or I can add another guide here so that there's like an inch space between them or something like that. I found this graphic to help out a little bit. The margins and padding was consistent across the whole thing. You want to arrange your sections as much as possible in a grid pattern, excuse me, um, and apply some kind of hierarchy to your text, meaning that your subtitle text should be the biggest, and it should increase in font size whenever there's key information. If you want to pop out, you don't have to do that. I haven't had any posters that really do that, but you can do that. You want the format or the figures formatted specifically for posters, and the coloring should be pretty consistent. So if you have a specific color for some of your figures, maybe consider that for your coloring for your entire poster. One thing that I did think was a really good idea when I saw this figure was pick one section to highlight, whether that's the abstract or the results section or the conclusion of the figures. And you could draw attention to that by making it a different colored background or a different colored section header. That way my eyes are immediately drawn to the important parts of your work. Some things to avoid. I would avoid rounded corners to box sections because this is a square poster, and if you have rounded edges to your corners and stuff, it might look out of place. I would avoid gradients and patterns as backgrounds, although some gradients are acceptable, like that pink gradient that Ryan had in her example. You will notice that they don't print as well as they look on the poster. So I may suggest you just use one solid color as your background, um, but you do you. Don't use too many fonts. Don't use word art and drop shadows and stuff like you saw in the space example. And my picture is blocking this here, but logos with non-transparent backgrounds or poor contrast with the backdrop, as in when I look at Marissa's here, you see the white background on the navy heading here. Doesn't quite look as good as if it was on a white background with plain text and it didn't have the white background of the JPEG here. So keep that in mind going forward. You can definitely use, instead of our FZN logo, you can use the FZN Biomed logo that I made for us last year. We can put those on our poster, and you can recolor that to your needs. I'll show you how to do that another time. This one's getting long, so I'm trying to go fast. You do want to make your figures the visual aid of your poster. That is a visual aid. You want those to speak most to your readers, because no one's going to stand there for 5 minutes to 10 minutes to read your entire poster. So you do want to have graphs and images and diagrams on your poster and have them be the direct uh, viewpoint, the direct goal of one of our work here. Now, I will show you the two examples again because they do it okay, and I think you guys could do a little bit better. You don't want to add graphs, diagrams, and images just for the sake of adding graphs, diagrams, and images. You want your images and diagrams to mean something and be something that the reader could be interested in seeing. In addition, please label your axes clearly, because maybe this will be the only thing in your entire poster that that reader will read. So you want to make sure your axes on your graphs and diagrams actually acknowledge what they're trying to measure. Furthermore, you can add short, meaningful captions like I've shown you before. Your text should actually reference your figures. They shouldn't just be random figures that don't mean anything to the text itself. And definitely don't use raw tables, screenshots of spreadsheets, or expect someone to interpret unlabeled graphs. We don't want this to be some uh, anonymous, labelless figure that has no meaning to the reader other than this bar is bigger than that bar. And I wanted to show you a couple examples because this part is not as easy as it sounds. So notice Marissa's poster has a couple figures with it. It has a picture of the chemical serotonin. It has a picture of her, a picture of her sampling, and a picture of her results. More often than not, the person really is, they're going to see you standing right next to your poster. So, do you really need a picture of you in your poster? Probably not. Do we really care about how the pipetting was set up? No. Do I really need to know the structure of serotonin? Maybe, if there's a specific chemical reaction that serotonin is going through in your project, but maybe not. This figure is just for kicks and giggles, so I would maybe leave it out. The only one that might really make any difference are these two right here, and I just said you don't really want raw data in the graph, and let's be frank, when we look at her data up here, the font is smaller. It's a different type of font. It's not centered in the boxes very well on this left side here. The lines are white while everything else is blue, which is okay, but doesn't really tell me much. This tells me a whole lot more, and I can actually deduce what the project is about based on what's happening right here. Just um, a better citation would be really, really great. And this being bigger and being the main focus would be awesome. So there's one way not to make your figures and stuff. A lot of this really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put into the poster. For Ryan's over here, I argue she did an okay job, not a great job, a good job, because her results are the center part to this right here. If she were to write maybe a smaller results section and put her references down here instead, she could have had um, this graph over here, this pie chart over here, be the main focus and be the center of her position rather than having just the results lined up right here. So I know that we are going to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Eager to over explain things because you guys have worked so hard on this project. But the text isn't what I'm going to go and see. You are already going to be talking at me during the presentation. So am I going to stand there and read something while you're talking to me about it? Or should we just use the pictures and figures to be able to tell the story of your project? That seems like the better option, and that is also why I'm telling you to make yourself a paper in addition to the poster, because the paper gives the context for the poster. And that brings me to my final point here. You're going to prioritize information over the defense of the information. Let's say I'm walking around and I see a bunch of posters and one catches my eye on something that I never thought about before. I'm not going to go and stand there and read the poster while the person is talking and then feel good about the information thrown at me. Instead, the presentation is a conversation. So, the most important goal of your poster without the presentation is for the reader to understand your research question, to be able to find your key results, and understand your main takeaway or conclusions without using a whole lot of time. Less important is how you did it, the methods of it, the limitations of it. Yes, it's good to be transparent, but if I'm reading a poster, I'm going to ask you about your limitations some, and having it on the poster is counterintuitive to you being able to defend yourself better by just talking to me. And acknowledgments. While I personally, as a teacher, appreciate acknowledgments because you're thanking someone for all the help that you do, it doesn't really mean a whole lot on a poster to the reader itself. So why are you putting it on the poster? So just remind yourself that you are going to be already talking to people as you're doing the presentation. The poster is just meant to back you up, which means that you shouldn't give every section equal visual weight. They shouldn't be the same size. They already shouldn't be because they're not going to be the same size when you write them in your paper. And you definitely don't want to put your entire methods protocol onto one poster because you are doing a month and a half long project, or 3 month long project, or 6 month long project, and there's no possible way to write that in 6 sentences or less to be able to fit it on your poster. Instead, just bullet point it if you have to. Have that QR code onto the poster, like these two, or at least Ryan did right there, so that you can give information about your paper to the person that wants to read more. And let this poster be a visual representation of what you are bringing to the table. I wanted to spend some time showing you what I think posters look like when they fit all these criteria, and I don't think there's a perfect poster out there. I think poster evolution has changed over the last 10 years that I've made posters, so you can definitely veer towards the more modernization approach if you like to. This one, however, from Shinanabi is a pretty good representation because she has her full paper QR coded in the corner here. She decided that against another logo. I thought that was a not bad idea. She has the figure that explains what she found in the very front and center of this all. I think she could have made the text a little bit bigger, but overall, easy to read. Methodology was short, results was short. The spacing for her boxes here does look a little clunky because there's some space between the subheading and the body text itself. But look, she did the different colored background for the body text, and that looks pretty good to me. I would say having a different sized box here versus over here is kind of clunky looking, but maybe it won't be perfect, and that's okay. References, she could have used a QR code for that as well, but I don't think she had a lot to write about in her conclusion. She could have stuck that box up there if she wanted to. Let's see if we can find another good one. This was last year's overall best bioscience winner from Maddie Carell. I do think, excuse me, Maddie Carroll. I do think her project wasn't that crazy awesome. It was just an okay project, but she presented it in the best way possible with a very short abstract here, a good introduction, The innovation is the front and center of it, with not only a section on describing the functionality of it, but the testing of the product and how to use the product and some feedback she got on the product. She made the product the center of the entire thing. She didn't even have to describe the product because, hey, it's right there. It's a picture. And then gave next steps as a conclusion section and kind of summarized things a little bit better. And look at that, full paper listed with it with this QR code to scan. Not a bad overall project. I think it's a well designed project, even if it is on the simpler side. One final well designed poster, and it's on the less well designed side, but definitely acceptable in terms of grading and stuff like that. Really big logos, probably too big overall, but uh, title is understandable, center stage. So are the pictures. They have the figures or the captions underneath them to explain what they are. The text is not the center of the story. The reader is not expected to walk up to the introduction and read every single thing to understand the project going forward. Instead, the introduction is set up in very short paragraphs to be able to read it very quickly and understand background of why she used yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, with these endocrine disruptors, um, and why she chose spectrophotometry with absorbance levels and such. So overall, not a bad project. Definitely could have put the full paper over here, but I don't think she wrote a full paper. So her references and acknowledgments took up a quarter of the poster, and that's okay, but it does scream, hey, I have nothing left to say. So, not a bad design of a poster, even for someone who has a little bit more work to do in the lab. That is it that I have for you. Obviously, you can make judgments for yourself on which posters you think are better or worse. We can even go back way, way back to my first year of them with good posters and bad posters. But up to you entirely on how you want to design it, whether it's a colorful background or not colorful background, whether it's got one section that's highlighted or a bunch of different sections that are highlighted. It's up to you entirely. Please just double check along as you go because I can give you pointers along the way for sure. Long video, I know. Sorry, I kept you around. Let me know how I can help.